Hey guys, hello, this is Jackie M again, bringing to you my live daily broadcast from my live Asian kitchen. And I'm going to answer some of the questions you have during the course of this broadcast about my previous broadcast. So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Jackie M, J-A-C-K-I-E-M. And my website is jackiem.com.au. My background, I used to be a Malaysian restaurateur. I'm based in Sydney, Australia. I come from a family of, well, my parents were, in any case, and my uncles and aunties were street food vendors back in the early days in Malaysia. So in some ways, I'm kind of like picking up the tradition of recreating Malaysian street food and Southeast Asian food in general, okay? So what I'm going to do today, and before I go on, I just want to give a shout out to Lenovo Australia, who provides me with the laptops I use to run and manage my broadcast with. And hopefully I'll have time, if I get to cover some of the questions during the course of this broadcast, I'll be able to show you what I'm doing with one of my laptops. But in any case, like I said, I'm using a Lenovo laptop for my broadcast. Today I'm using the IdeaPad Y700, which is a gaming laptop. And I want to give a shout out to Rode Australia as well, manufacturers of world-class microphones that I use for my broadcast as well. If you have any questions at all, by all means, hit me up. For those of you following me for the first time, I just want to point out, because YouTube is rampant with trolling and with thumbs downs, dislikes, and that sort of stuff. If you expect this to be a short, sweet video with lots of edits to keep you interested, just hop out now rather than kind of like whine and troll me and give me thumbs downs, because I'm cooking. In this series, what I do is I cook everything from start to finish. The benefit of that is I get to fill in the blanks as to what is involved during the cooking process. And also the other point I want to point out as well is a lot of these recipes, or some of these recipes, stuff that I've been doing for years and years, and others are actually experimental as well, okay? So some of them may not turn out, but if you go to my website, jackiem.com.au, I do retroactively post the recipes, and I explain any tweaks and whatever didn't work and that sort of stuff. So make sure you sign up for my mailing list at jackiem.com.au so you get all the updates, okay? And what I'm making today is, I've done this a few times, right? So I'm a little bit reticent about doing it again, but it's just something, a lot of these recipes, I've got to point out as well, is stuff that me and Noah, that we have to eat, right? And I know Noah is craving for this because he's been whining after the noodle dinner last night that I made in yesterday's broadcast. He wants some protein, okay? So I'm going to make some fish bowls, but again, it's also contingent on what I have available in my pantry, in my fridge. So today what I thought I might do is make some meatballs, right? I say meatballs loosely. Basically, it's going to be a combination of fish and chicken mince. If for those of you who don't know me from my past broadcasts, your best bet would be to go to youtube.com/JackieM to catch up on some of these techniques and some of these recipes I've shown in previous ones. But today, what I'm going to do is I was going to make some fish balls, but I don't have quite enough fish. I actually don't have, actually it's not too bad. But I'm going to combine fish with some chicken mince. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to deep fry them. But before I do that, I'm going to actually stuff these meatballs with some scallops, okay? I'm either going to stuff them, I haven't decided yet, or I'm going to kind of like just stick them on top of the scallop and deep fry them like that. And let's see how it turns out. And I'll explain a little bit about the background of this dish in the process as well. So first of all, I'm going to be using a food processor, and I'm going to be using my Thermomix for this, but you can use a regular food processor for this. The Thermomix or my other kitchen machine, my Thermocook, Optimum Thermocook, they basically double up as food processors, blenders, and all that sort of stuff. So sometimes when I do some of my processing in them, don't be intimidated. You could, in theory, do a fairly good job with a regular food processor, but keep in mind a Thermomix and a Thermocook have bigger motors in them, so they can actually process food a lot finer and a lot faster as well. So you're just going to have to adapt them depending on what machine you use. So like I said, I was going to make fish balls, but I didn't think I had enough fish. But in hindsight, I might do. But in any case, if you've watched any of my recent content, you're going to find that my fishball recipe has evolved thanks to Uncle Jim, Jim Yong, who is a Malaysian restaurateur, also based here in Sydney, Australia, who suggested to me that making fish balls, you can in fact combine it with some chicken mince, okay? And that gives it a firmer, bouncier texture. So that's why I'm calling it meatballs. I thought I was going to have more chicken mince ratio to fish, which is why I decided to call it meatballs, and I'll explain also one other reason why I'm calling it meatballs as opposed to fish balls in a sec. But I want to be able to get a move on this pretty quickly. Now, this is the amount of fish I'm using, and I'm using basa fillets. The reason for that is that it's cheap, okay? Now, usually if you were to make fish balls and you weren't actually combining it with like chicken, you would want to use a more expensive type of fish. I'm thinking things like mackerel, okay? And what in Malaysia we call feather, what in Australia is called featherback, right? It's basically a type of fish that is very popular in Malaysia for using for making fish balls, but it's quite expensive here in Australia, as is mackerel. Okay, so usually I would have a smaller ratio of fish to chicken, but like I said, I'm calling this meatball because I'm just changing the ratio. You are free to experiment with your recipes, so don't be scared about doing that. So I'm using this chicken mince is in a pretty solid frozen block, but because I'm using the Thermomix, it should be able to handle it pretty well. Okay, so I'm combining the two of them in the Thermomix, and I'm just mixing it up. Okay. Okay, so that's about 12 seconds. And in the meantime, I've got some scallops. If you watch one of my recent broadcasts, I did talk about these scallops. This is from the same batch that I used for my previous recipe. I make fish balls with some scallops thrown in because I felt these were frozen scallops that came in a packet, and they've been treated so they don't have a lot of flavor, which is why I'm kind of like trying to use them up in a little bit kind of like out of the box ways, right? So with these scallops, they've been defrosted. They're still a little bit wet, to be honest. Just let me try and strain it out a little bit more. And some of them are quite large. I'm just going to come up close and show you what it looks like, right? So these are scallops with the roe off, but like I said, I used them last week, and they didn't really have much flavor in them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to season them with a bit of flavor. I'm just putting a sprinkling of chicken powder in these. And again, you know, if you're just catching up, this is your first time watching me, you're going to find that I use certain ingredients fairly regularly. One of them is chicken powder. This is a Knorr brand. It does contain some MSG, but you know, there are other brands out there that don't. So if you're averse to additives like these, just switch them around a little bit, but of course you're going to expect that the recipe, that the flavors are going to be a little bit different. Now I'm just going to put a touch of sugar in this as well, and I'm going to add some pepper. Okay, so these are pretty standard seasoning ingredients for a lot of Chinese stir-fry meats and that sort of stuff. And finally, I'm just going to put some tapioca flour in this. Okay, and that will just help it to hold together a little bit better, hopefully, when I assemble all this, okay? So just let me put this away. Right? Now, let's have a look at what it's like. Okay, I'm going to need to process this a little bit longer, and also just give me a second, I'm just going to grab my spatula. Okay, so just scraping this down, I'll show you what this looks like. Okay, so the It's pretty sticky, but I can still feel a couple of like hard bits in there, which suggests to me that it needs a little bit more processing. Okay, the hard bits are still like the frozen chunks of chicken. Okay, let's take a look at this. Now, if you weren't using frozen chicken or frozen fish, by the way, the fish holds a lot of water in its frozen state, which is why I defrosted it and strained out the water. But in a previous broadcast where I used frozen fish, I found that the mixture turned out to be quite wet and soft, which isn't ideal. So I defrosted the fish, but I kept the chicken frozen because the chicken doesn't have that problem. But also, if you were processing fish or any kind of meat in your blender, right? You got to be careful that you don't over process it, because the blades can start to heat up, right? And then basically, when they come into contact with the meat that you're processing, it's going to cause the meat to actually cook, and you don't want that, because then it just basically ruins the whole batch when part of the meat is cooked. For no other reason than the fact that it will no longer retain its sticky texture. And in the meantime, I've got a pot of oil over here. I'm just going to start heating it up. This is used oil, which is why it looks a little bit darker than usual. But I've been using it for deep frying in the last week or so. So it's due for a change, but I should be able to stretch it for this one more use, right? The other thing I've got to mention about yesterday's broadcast, about the Yeemin noodles. I had someone ask me, because I spelled Yeemin as Y-E-E-M-E-E-N, and they asked me, basically, does I mean Y-E-E-M-E-I-N, right? And I said, I do mean that, but the reason why I didn't stick with the more popular spelling is because there is no logical reason why it should be spelled M-E-I-N, right? Because when you Romanize Chinese pronunciations, I know that English is not a phonetic language, and I know and anyone can tell you English is not a phonetic language, right? But if you're going to Romanize pronunciations, it makes sense for the Romanization to actually sound like how it should be pronounced in Chinese, okay? And allowing for the fact that there are various different Chinese dialects, right? There is no dialect in Chinese that I'm aware of, but it makes logical sense for Yeemin to be spelled M-E-I-N for the mean, right? Because logically, if you think M-E-I-N, how do you pronounce M-E-I-N? Do you pronounce it mine? Do you pronounce it main? No Chinese dialect I'm aware of pronounces it that way, okay? So in Cantonese it's called Yeemin. In Hakka it's Yimian, okay? Then it would make sense if whoever originally Romanized it, it would have made logical sense if they were Hakka or if they spoke Mandarin to spell it M-I-E-N, okay? But that's not how this popularized spelling is, M-E-I-N. It's just, so that's why I didn't stick with it, okay? And if you're going to argue the point, and obviously I guess that that person was just inquiring, but if you were going to argue the point, the fact of the matter is there are lots and lots of Chinese ingredients and Chinese dish names and all that are spelled a multitude of different ways, because there's no standardization as far as Chinese words are concerned when they're Romanized, except perhaps in mainland China, right? You're starting, when I was growing up in Malaysia, I'm that old, where things were not like this back in the day. But at some point, I remember a lot of Chinese Romanized words started coming out with spellings that included X, right? Which wasn't how we used to Romanize our spelling. X is the Chinese government way of trying to standardize the Romanization of Chinese words, right? So if it were a dish that came out of Malaysia, you know, even if it was in the same dialect, which is Mandarin, of China, we wouldn't have spelled it with X, okay? Okay, so that's my fish paste, fish plus chicken paste. To this, I'm going to add, this is experimental. I've got here some dried red onion, okay? I've talked at length about fried onion or fried shallots. This is actually dried, it says red onion, but I think it's actually shallots, so dried shallots. So I'm experimenting, don't know how this will turn out. I'm just sprinkling. The reason why I think it might work is because it's being deep fried and I like the aroma of fried onion in my mixture. So I'm just gonna throw some of that in. And I'm also going to put some pepper in here. And just about, I guess, about half a teaspoon of sugar in here. Again, there's a lot of Malaysian cooking, Asian cooking. We like to balance out the flavor a little bit with just, you know, a hint of sugar, okay? It's not meant to be overly sweet, but it just kind of helps balance out the flavor. And I'm going to add, I guess, that much chicken powder, okay, about a teaspoon and a half. And I'm also going to add some tapioca starch to this, just to help everything hold together. So to be honest, looking at the texture, this is actually holding together quite well, right? So I'm just putting this aside. And let's see how this works out. I'm not sure how it works. I'm going to grab some spoons, so give me a minute again. Now, I've got to mention part of the reason why I decided to do this recipe was the fact that I wanted to use up some of my scallops, right? These pretty tasteless scallops. But the other reason I wanted to do this was it does remind me of a Cantonese dish that I used to have here in Sydney, Australia, at a restaurant that no longer operates. They used to do what they call stuffed scallops, okay? But what it was essentially were these deep fried fish balls with a piece of scallop on the bottom, right? So it's not technically stuffed, but and it would be served on a bed of broccoli, right? And it would have like a runny, starchy egg sauce over it. I'm not going to make the egg yolks, no, not egg yolk, the egg white sauce really technically is what they are. I'm not going to make the egg sauce. The reason for that is because, like I said, this is for personal consumption. I don't have any broccoli lying around and I don't want to use this all up as a one dish with, like, you know, with a sauce over it, but I can tell you how to make the sauce. It's pretty simple. Okay, so let's see how this goes. So this is just heating up nicely. And what I would traditionally do if I were deep frying this is I would just grab a handful of this and then just kind of like squeeze some out over the top of my fist like this, spoon it, and then drop it in there, right? But let's see how it will work if I were to embed a, this scallop is really large. I'm thinking I might need to cut it in half. Okay, let's see how this will work if I were to embed a scallop in it, okay? I'm just feeling right now that the scallop is quite wet, so it may not hold together. So we may need to add more tapioca starch over it. Okay, so it's not. Let me see, where's my tapioca starch? Okay, I'm thinking, you know, if I were to use an egg, whether that would help as well. But let's try this again. So with this, with my live broadcasts, I'm hoping to be able to kind of like demystify Southeast Asian or Asian cooking, right? My background, like I said, I'm Malaysian. I grew up in Malaysia, moved to Australia at 17 years of age, but my family is of Chinese descent, as are a lot of Malaysians, right? So this is kind of like sitting at the bottom of this, but I'm just kind of molding it in to hopefully hold it in place. And let's throw this in the water, in the oil, okay? And see how it goes. The oil isn't quite hot enough. I'm just going to crank it up a little bit. got a feeling I'm running out of gas on that. Okay, so being of Chinese descent, it does mean that a lot of my dishes are Chinese influenced, but also the beauty of Malaysia is that it's a multicultural country. So we have our cuisine is influenced by all the different immigrant cultures in Malaysia, namely the Chinese, the Malays were the original inhabitants, or they were there certainly earlier than the Chinese were, and the Indians from southern India predominantly, right? And also Malaysia used to be a colony, firstly of Portugal, then the Netherlands, then England. Okay, so we do have some aspects of our cuisine with Portuguese influence, probably not so much Dutch influence that I can recall. And of course, a lot of our food is a fusion of dishes from fusion of cooking styles and ingredients from all these different countries. So you might find food in Malaysia that is distinctly Chinese, distinctly Indian, South Indian, and also some food that is actually kind of a mixture of everything. You might, you know, I'm thinking of dishes like laksa. If you don't know what laksa is, L-A-K-S-A, is essentially a coconut creamy, well, curry laksa is anyway. There are different types of laksa. Coconut creamy noodle broth, okay, with that's spicy as well, and it includes ingredients like noodles and tofu, which are very Chinese. The coconut cream and the spices, you know, which are very Malay, and also some of the, you know, depending on what version of laksa, you know, you get some Indian spices in them as well. When I talk about Indian spices, I'm thinking of things like, you know, what you find in a typical pack of curry powder, so ingredients like coriander seeds, cardamom, cumin, fennel, and all that. When I'm thinking Malay ingredients, I'm thinking more generally herbs and all that, right? Like laksa leaves, lemongrass, that sort of stuff, okay? So this is starting to fry up and it's still holding together, so it's kind of working. Aesthetically, it's not the most gorgeous, but I'm trying to make sure that the scallop doesn't fall off, okay? And you could theoretically cut the scallops into smaller pieces as well, which I might do with some of the rest of this. Like I said, if you've got any questions at all, hit me up anywhere in your comments, and I will try to get to them, if not during my broadcast. This is my son Noah, by the way. For those of you who don't know me, part of the reason why I gave up my restaurant was to look after my son Noah, who's got Down syndrome. He spent the first 7 months of his life in the ICU. He's now 4.5 years old, and you can just see part of his body cut off. Okay, but he's a well-behaved little kid, but developmentally delayed, right? And pretty much written off by the doctors. Okay, now this is taking a long time because the gas canister's just running out of gas. So I'm just gonna take my gloves off and replace that quickly. And someone asked me also yesterday about my broadcast, because I originally called it a 10-minute ginger and shallot noodles, but the broadcast ended up taking 20 21 minutes, so they were saying, don't you mean 21-minute noodles? But I did say at the start of the broadcast, because I talk as I go along and I have to settle Noah at some point in time as well, that, you know, it probably will take a little bit longer than that. But the other factor that came into it was the brand of noodles I was using was a little bit tougher to soften up than I had anticipated. Again, I always talk about this, different brands of Asian ingredients are going to have different behavioral characteristics, right? The other thing I wanted to mention, which I did mention in the broadcast, is traditionally with these noodles, they would suggest you either pre-boil it or soak it in boiling water. You can heat up a kettle of water, stick the noodles in a, you know, in a bowl, and then just soak them in water, which would actually, you know, if they were already softened, it would take less time in the pan, right? And the other thing I wanted to mention, what slowed it down a little bit more, was the fact that I was using an electric frying pan where the temperature control was so regulated that I'm so used to using a wok where the heat, because it comes up the sides, the heat kind of like rotates around, right? But also in using a wok, I'm so used to regulating the temperature. If it starts heating up, I turn it down, and vice versa. But using an electric frying pan where it's temp control, whatever setting I have it on, when I start to see it smoking, I turn it down. But in fact, really, it makes more sense to leave it as is. You know, just set it to the temperature you want and leave it as is, because it doesn't actually keep heating up, right? Because it does have a thermostat built in where it stops heating up, right? So this is frying up. Like I said, aesthetically, it's not gorgeous. And I'm just going to break up some of these just to make them smaller pieces. And what I'm going to do is, rather than have them kind of like, I'm just going to try and like wrap them up around the stuff, the fish paste a little bit better, so that it's completely hidden, okay? And if you're really fussy, you can actually dip this in more cornstarch before you throw it in the deep fryer. But I try and limit the amount of cornstarch I use in making fish paste, because the more cornstarch you use, or tapioca starch, which is what I use, the more cornstarch you use, the more spongy the product becomes. If that's the aim of your final product, that's fine, right? But generally, if you're making traditional Asian fish balls, you really want to be able to taste more of the fish and less of the starch, okay? So just wrapping this. So what I'm doing now is really kind of like stuffing the fish paste with the scallop, as opposed to, and you can see it's a little bit of a challenge because the scallops are slippery and wet, okay? Okay. Now, yeah, the reason why I call this meatballs is that every time I say fish balls, we Asians eat fish balls, right? And every time I say fish balls, I get the invariable comments about how I didn't realize fish had such big balls and whatever. But I'm thinking, right, I'm one of these people who are so straight-laced that I don't generally find humor in like schoolboy jokes, right? But you know, when we talk about fish balls, we think fish balls as opposed to meatballs, right? Not fish balls as in literally the sexual organs of like marine animals. So please. So I'm calling this meatballs because there is actually a large amount of chicken in this mixture. But you know, when you think fish balls or cuttlefish balls and all that, it just means meatballs that are made with fish flesh as opposed to, chicken or whatever else you use, okay? So this is ready to come out. I'm just going to dish this out. this one's really come out. So the original ones are a little bit exposed. I'm trying to coat it a little bit better. And I'll be able to tell you after, once these have cooled down, I'll be able to tell you whether the dried onions were, if I had fresh onion, I would have used that, but I used all my onion. If you watched my broadcast a couple of days ago, I used all my onion making crispy shallots, okay? And I mentioned also in my earlier that my previous broadcast where I experimented making fried fish bowls by adding, instead of these dried shallots I'm doing today, I added fried shallots. That wasn't a great idea in hindsight because I kind of knew that would happen, because using fried shallots makes sense if you were steaming the fish balls, right? But when you deep fry the fish balls and you've already got fried shallots that are already brown, what you end up doing is you overcook the shallots and they end up tasting a little bit better, okay? I mean, it tasted fine, but I could taste a bit of undertones in those fish balls, so I wouldn't do that again. I would add fresh shallots, but not fried shallots, and let's see if the dried shallots actually are a good idea. Okay, so just taking these out now, and I'm finding that the mixture is kind of like splitting a little bit as well. Okay, so even the ones that I tried to completely encase in the mixture, they're kind of breaking up a little bit. But let's try it again, okay? And if I wanted to be pedantic, I could actually drench the scallops in a lot of flour, and that would help bind it, but I don't have enough of this for it to be an issue, right? So the scallops, even though I drenched some corn tapioca starch through the marinade, it's still quite wet. I didn't put anywhere near enough for it to be a factor in helping this bind together. Okay. But this is an example of how you can use chicken, minced chicken, right, and a cheap fish like basa fillets. These basa fillets I bought frozen from my local supermarket, and they cost $6.50 for a kilo pack. So next time you go shopping, have a look in the freezer section of your local supermarket and buy some basa, and you can have fish bowls with as part of your diet, right? Very, very cheaply, very easily. And actually, you know, you could do this a lot faster if you were kind of like trying to be cute and use up some of your scallops with this. Okay. So you could, in theory, just kind of like be putting this in. I did some earlier without the scallops, and it literally took me like about 15 minutes from start to finish, I guess, because the blending only takes seconds, and then you add the seasoning, you heat up the oil, and you throw in like drops of mixture in the oil. Okay. Again, if you are just joining me, all these recipes will show up on my website, jackiem.com.au. So some of the recipes from earlier this week are already at jackiem.com.au, and some should appear at some point later today or over the weekend. And if you subscribe to my website, you'll get notified of them, right? You'll get a weekly summary of them, and you'll get personal messages from me every now and then as well. If there's any particular recipe you want me to tackle, make sure you mention it, right, in the comment section, and I will try and work that in to a future broadcast. That's my spatula. So what I'm going to use these for, once they're deep fried, you can use them right away, or you can store them in the fridge or even the freezer, and then just toss them into your, next time you have some soup or some noodle soup. That's the best way to use them up, I find. But like I said, if you want to make an eggy runny sauce, what you would do, the Cantonese version is very plain, right? They just have some stock, or you can just use water, add a pinch of chicken stock granules, or you can add a pinch of salt, pepper, and a pinch of sugar. Heat it up, simmer it, and then you want to thicken it with some tapioca starch, right? So a bit of tapioca, like what I did in yesterday's broadcast, a bit of tapioca, a bit of water, add it in, thicken it up, turn off the heat, and then you crack the egg, or you can just use egg white if you're really pedantic, into it and stir it around quickly, and that will give you a runny egg sauce that you can use to pour over these scallop balls. And if you've got some broccoli or some Chinese greens, you can separately steam them or boil them and line your platter with them before you throw in the scallop balls over the top and the sauce over everything. Okay, so that would be the traditional way they serve it at Chinese restaurants, but that's not how I want to use up these meatballs, meat/scallop balls. Okay. So, and when you're deep frying, just make sure you turn these around to make sure that they're evenly cooked. And how do you know they're done? You kind of know when they start, like, you see the oil bubbling, right? That's created by the moisture in the mixture. When the oil starts to settle around these balls and they're floating and they stay afloat, that's when you kind of know when they're done, right? I'm going to fold these up to show you what they look like. Okay, no, one second, look. Okay, so there you go. Like I said, some of them are split. Okay. And you can use this in lots of different ways. You can even throw it in a curry, you know. You can have like a vegetable curry with some meatballs in them. You know it. Okay. So just taking them out. And I'll finish these off air. Oh yeah, I wanted to show you, right, to carry my theory across about the different spellings of Chinese words, Chinese Chinese ingredients, Chinese dish names. Okay, so where is my pen? Here you go. Okay, so this is my yoga book, which is a laptop, but it also is a it comes with a pen that I can write on it. I don't know if you can see that. Okay, now I want to talk about this, right? So this word here, a lot of people get it confused, okay? This says sui gao, right? Which means water dumpling, literally in Chinese. And then this word is siu mai, right? A lot of people, and at the bottom I've got siu long bao and siu mai spelled a different way, right? Now, the point I want to make is that sui, S-U-I, pronounced phonetically sui, right? A lot of people spell it wrong. They spell it S-I-U, siu gao, and that's wrong, okay? There's no such thing as siu gao. It should be S-U-I, sui gao, which brings me back to the point of the yi mean, Y-E-E-M-E-I-N, right? Unless you pronounce M-E-I-N as mean, there's absolutely no reason why you should, because M-E-I-N just sounds like it should be pronounced main or mine or whatever, right? It's not pronounced mine in Chinese. No Chinese dialect I'm aware of where noodles are pronounced mine or mean or men, right? In Hakka it's pronounced min, right? So M-I-E-N would make more sense. This is why I didn't spell Yimin, Y-E-M-E-I-N. So that's the point I want to make. And also I want to point out the fact that siomai, which is those Chinese dumplings, right? Steamed dumplings. they can be spelled so many different ways. So if you just Google Siumai, S-I-U-M-A-I, you'll find various different spellings, and the reason sometimes it's spelled S-H-A-O, or X-I-A-O, right? So there are lots and lots of different ways of spelling them, and it's all predicated on the fact that there are lots of different Chinese dialects. So depending on the the person who's romanizing it, what dialect of Chinese they're associating that dish with, it will get spelled differently. Okay, and my claim to fame to all this linguistic stuff is the fact that before this whole food thing, I used to be an IT consultant, but before the whole IT consultancy thing, I actually, my degree at Sydney University was actually around languages. I studied 5 foreign languages, and I grew up with 3 others, okay? So I do know a little bit about phonetics, about languages, and all that sort of stuff. In any case, thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow. No, not tomorrow. Tomorrow's the weekend. I will see you Monday. Ciao.